Welcome back to the deep dive. Our subject today is, it's a heavy one. We're focusing on a really tragic and complex case from 2012 in Joppatown, Maryland.
That's right.
This deep dive is about the murder of Kujoe Agyei-Kodie. And it's a case that, well, it exposed some profound issues, didn't it? Failures in institutional response, mental health, the justice system.
Absolutely. And our goal today, I think, is to try and move past just the sensational headlines that, inevitably surrounded this event at the time.
Right.
We really need to synthesize the critical timeline, the shocking facts of the crime itself, and maybe most importantly, the complex legal outcome, all drawing from the source material we have.
Okay. So the central action here involves two young men. The victim, Kujoe Agyei-Kodie, he was an exchange student from Ghana. And the perpetrator was Alexander Kinyua. And the core facts are, well, they're instantly chilling. Agyei-Kodie was murdered with an axe.
Yeah.
And then the perpetrator engaged in cannibalism, consuming the victim's organs. It's hard to even say.
It is. And I think to really understand the tragedy, we first need to establish the setting. It was incredibly vulnerable for the victim. Let's maybe unpack his situation first.
Okay.
Agyei-Kodie, as you said, an exchange student. But critically, at the time of the murder, he was actually staying with the Kinyua family.
With the perpetrator's family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of in this immigration limbo. Apparently, he hadn't complied with the terms of his visa, and he was waiting for deportation. So completely reliant on his host family during that period.
Wow. That reliance, it just makes the location of the crime, the Kinyua home itself, feel all the more disturbing.
Exactly.
And Alexander Kinyua, the perpetrator, he was just 21 at the time, not, living on the fringes or anything. He was an engineering student at Morgan State University in Baltimore.
Right. And this wasn't just any family connection either. Kinyua himself, he'd emigrated from Kenya as a child, became a U.S. citizen. And his father was actually a professor at Morgan State.
Really? At the same university?
Yes. So this situates the whole tragedy right within what looks like, a stable academic domestic environment, which sets up this really severe contrast between Kinyua's public life and what was clearly a hidden mental health crisis brewing.
Yeah. And the timeline. This is where this deep dive becomes really crucial, I think. Because the murder, it wasn't just some sudden isolated incident, was it?
No, Rondo.
The source material shows this series of escalating warnings, interactions with institutions that happened right before the killing.
That is the absolute critical point here. The friction in this whole timeline. The murder of Agyei-Kodie happened on May 25th, 2012. But that was only days after Kinyua had been released on bail.
Released on bail? For what?
For a separate and apparently extremely brutal assault.
Okay, wait, so he committed a serious assault, got arrested, made bail, and then committed the murder.
That's exactly the sequence. It's quite shocking when you lay it out.
Let's detail that first attack then. It happened just 6 days before the murder. How did the sources describe how severe that was? And, what safeguards should have kicked in then?
Well, Kinyua was arrested on Saturday, May 19th. It was after a violent fight in his dorm room at Morgan State. The charges were serious. First-degree assault and excessive endangerment of life.
That sounds, very serious.
They are. Not minor charges at all. They indicate a high level of violence, a perceived danger. And the court system seemed to recognize this, initially anyway, because they set bail at U.S. $220,000.
$220,000. That's a huge amount. So what does it tell us that he was actually released on that bail, given how serious the charge was?
Well, first it tells us the family was somehow able to secure the funds or the bond. But maybe more importantly, it points to a systemic gap, doesn't it?
How so?
A bail amount that high usually signifies the court sees the person as either a flight risk or, and this seems crucial here, a danger to the community. Yet the system allowed his release. And that release put him immediately back into the community, and in this specific tragic case, directly back into the home where Agyei-Kodie was staying.
And the source material mentions his mother, right, while the family was trying to get him out on bail.
Yes, it's quite heartbreaking, actually. There's apparently a Facebook post from his mother detailing the arrest, pleading for funds to get the best legal defense possible.
So it sounds like the family was focused on the legal crisis.
It paints that picture, yes. A family struggling to manage this acute crisis through legal channels, maybe not fully grasping or perhaps not knowing how to address the severe mental health dimensions that were likely driving this.
And this was happening right alongside Kinyua's own, disturbing online activity.
Exactly. That struggle to get bail money, it directly overlapped with Kinyua leaving this trail of bizarre paranoid writings on social media. It gives us a real insight into just how rapid his decline must have been.
The sources say just 2 days before his arrest for the murder, he was posting these things online.
Yeah. Writings on Facebook, apparently all in capital letters, which, can often be a sign of distress or maybe mania in digital communication.
Mm.
And the content itself was just terrifying.
What kind of things was he saying?
Well, the sources quote some really nonsensical, disturbing statements, references to ritual HBCU mass human sacrifices around the country, mentions of ethnic cleansing and death cults.
HBCU, historically black colleges and universities, like Morgan State.
Precisely. Morgan State is an HBCU. So these weren't subtle hints. They seemed like pretty unambiguous public displays of delusion, severe paranoia. And they apparently went unheeded by authorities after he was released on bail.
So you have this incredibly severe prior assault charge, the really high bail amount, the mother's public plea for legal help, these deeply disturbing online posts. It's just this compressed timeline of red flags.
Yeah, all leading directly to May 25th, 2012, and the murder of Kujoe Agyei-Kodie in that house in Joppatown.
And the sources confirm the weapon was an axe. But the element that really caught the world's attention, understandably, was Kinua's admission to cannibalism, specifically eating parts of Agyei-Kodie's organs, the heart and part of the brain.
That's what he admitted to, yes.
Yeah.
It's an element that adds another layer of, horror and complexity to the case.
And what's also fascinating, in a grim way, is how it was discovered. It wasn't immediate, right? It took 6 days until May 31st.
That's right. It wasn't like a police investigation led directly to the body initially. It was actually Kinua's own brother.
His brother found something.
Yes. He called the police after making just a horrifying discovery in the family's basement.
What did he find?
He found what he immediately recognized as potential human remains stored in 2 tins down there.
2 tins, wow.
In the basement of the family home. And apparently, the brother's cooperation with the police was immediate and critical. After that initial discovery, further remains were then found outside a nearby church about a mile away.
Okay. And after that discovery by the brother, Alexander Kinua was arrested.
Taken into custody, yes. And charged with first-degree murder, alongside those earlier assault charges.
So once he was arrested for the murder, the legal process pretty quickly shifted focus, didn't it? Towards his mental state.
It did, yes. It moved rapidly into assessing his mental competency.
And what happened when the medical professionals got involved? What did they find?
The assessment seems to have been quite definitive. Alexander Kinua was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, which is, a severe chronic mental illness. It profoundly affects a person's ability to distinguish reality from delusion.
Okay. So that diagnosis then became central to the legal proceeding.
Absolutely. It formed the foundation of his defense and ultimately led to the specific judicial finding in this case.
And because of that diagnosis, initially, he wasn't even competent to stand trial, meaning he couldn't understand the charges or help his lawyers.
Correct. That was the initial finding. But the final verdict, the one that resolved the case, is a very specific legal finding that I think it's important for listeners to understand. He was found guilty, but not criminally responsible.
Guilty, but not criminally responsible. Okay, break that down. What does that actually mean? It sounds contradictory.
It does sound a bit contradictory, yeah. But guilty, but not criminally responsible, or GBNCR.
Yeah.
It's the absolute crux here. It is not the same thing as not guilty by reason of insanity or NGRI, which people might be more familiar with.
Okay, so how is GBNCR different?
The GBNCR verdict, it acknowledges 3 things at once. First, yes, the murder absolutely happened. Second, Kinua was the person who committed that act. That's the guilty part.
Right.
But third, and this is key, because of his diagnosed severe mental illness, the paranoid schizophrenia, he was legally incapable of forming the necessary criminal intent, or understanding the wrongfulness of his actions, or conforming his conduct to the law at the time of the act. He lacked criminal responsibility.
So it acknowledges he did it factually, but the law recognizes his illness meant he wasn't responsible in the criminal sense.
Precisely. It recognizes the illness removed his capacity for legal culpability at that specific moment.
So what's the practical outcome then? If he's guilty but not responsible, where does he end up? Not prison, presumably.
No, not traditional prison. The consequence of that GBNCR verdict is an indefinite commitment to a state psychiatric facility. In this case, Kinua was indefinitely committed to a maximum security Maryland mental institution.
Indefinitely, meaning?
Meaning he remains institutionalized for treatment and also for public safety. He'll stay there until medical professionals and the court system determine he no longer poses a danger to himself or others, which, frankly, in cases involving this level of violence and severe mental illness is an incredibly high bar to meet. It's rare.
So it provides a kind of legal closure, but it definitely opens up these deeper questions, doesn't it? About responsibility, mental health care, prevention.
Exactly.
And the fallout wasn't just in the courts either. The source material mentions institutional changes happening because of this.
That's right. The university setting, Morgan State, where Kujoe was a student and where his father worked, they responded directly to what were seen as systemic failures highlighted by this case.
Especially the fact that a student charged with first-degree assault was released on bail and returned to the campus community, essentially, before committing this horrific murder.
Yes. And so, in the wake of the killing, Morgan State University moved pretty swiftly, it seems, to enhance their security and oversight. They established a new position, a chief public safety officer.
Okay. So that decision, it really highlights that the institution realized they needed stronger, more dedicated leadership to manage campus safety risks, especially when those risks involve this terrible intersection of severe violence, potential mental health crises, and the justice system's bail decision.
Yeah, it was a clear reaction to try and prevent anything similar from happening again.
This has been, well, a really difficult and layered deep dive.
It has.
When we look back at everything we've discussed from the sources, it feels like there are maybe 3 key tension points that emerge for you, the listener, to think about.
I agree. I think first there's just the extreme vulnerability of the victim, Kujoe Agyei-Kodie, an exchange student facing deportation, totally dependent on the very family where the danger resided.
Yeah. Then second, the sheer density of those missed warning signs, that prior assault charge, the huge bail amount that still resulted in release, those bizarre, disturbing social media posts, all of it seemingly failing to trigger an effective mental health intervention or maybe a different kind of judicial hold.
Right. And then third, there's the complex resolution the justice system arrived at.
Yeah.
That verdict, guilty but not criminally responsible.
It closes the legal case, in a way, but it leaves us wrestling with this really difficult intersection of severe mental illness and criminal accountability.
Absolutely. And that sequence of events we talked about is just so tight, isn't it?
Incredibly tight. The May 19th first-degree assault charge, the release on that high bail soon after, and then the fatal murder on May 25th, just days apart. That sequence really forces us, I think, to focus on the points where the system could have perhaps intervened differently. Yeah. And that leads us directly into our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Knowing how severe that initial charge was, first-degree assault, excessive endangerment of life, and knowing the extremely high bail, the $220,000, what mechanisms maybe could have been in place, either in the judicial system or the mental health system, or maybe bridging the two mechanisms to mandate some kind of immediate institutionalized evaluation for dangerousness before Alexander Kujoe was released back into that domestic setting, the setting that became the scene of this awful tragedy.
It's a huge question. It really raises these profound issues about how we balance individual civil liberties with public safety, especially when an acute mental health crisis becomes so violently apparent.
A very difficult but absolutely necessary line of inquiry, I think.
Agreed.
Well, thank you for joining us for this very sobering deep dive. We will be back soon with more insights.
Subscribe for more.